Alrighty then. Bear with me while I figure out how to do this. And action! Well, okay. I was just checking out this. This is the Harrison, part of the Harrison Chronicles, the manual, the diary, the journal from my good friend and mentor Harrison, which you already know all about because you've already read the book. The book. Yeah. 2020.
Hey, you look like me.
Okay, so today's we're going to have a reading from chapter 1, and it's called When the Cock Crows, is what is called on the website. In the book itself there is no title. Why would there be? This thing is a curated collection of journal entries that I made in the aforementioned Harrison Chronicles. So today we're gonna read from chapter 1, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about it. If you don't mind, you can always tune out if that part gets boring. But what does it all mean? That is always something that is part of this work. What the meaning behind it? It's not really a real long book, but it is packed with information, ideas, thoughts, and today is about when a cock crows, when the sun comes up, and you're sitting out on the dock of the bay, sipping a little bit of your Joe. Actually, there's nothing in it. What does the rising sun signify? And a cock crowing with the dawn is a symbolic event. It has a great symbolism. And in today's world, today being, I've returned back down to the year 2020 to talk to you. The producers reminded me because I was looking in. That's why I was looking in the journal of this particular year, and I remember now that back in 2020, it was kind of a rough year for a lot of people. You are already into 30 named storms. You still name them. In the future, we don't name them anymore because there's so many of them. You got 30. You ran out of alphabetical names and then started in on the Greek alphabet, which I remember reading this. That's what happened in that particular year, 2020. The year 2020, which I bet you from reading over Harrison's notes that you hate it. You hate 2020. You wish it would go away. Maybe the producer should have named it different than 2020, even though it's not a year. If you notice, if you look real carefully, it's 20-20, which has a double meaning, which I'm going to let you figure out. But my point being, yes, there is a point. it's the dawn. It's the dawn of a new age. And it's maybe hasn't dawned on you yet. A lot of you, at this point in time, if you're watching this at the end of the year 2020, it may not have occurred to you yet that we have reached a tipping point in a lot of things. It's not just the environment with climate change. We've reached a critical mass, let's put it that way, because we have been, I guess, let me think, in 2020, the geologists haven't quite told you yet that you're in the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene is an epoch, a geological epoch, which you have entered. Actually, you've already entered it many years ago. What is that? The Anthropocene? It's an age of the planet where humans and human activity have made impacts. We have done such damage that to the environment that we have now altered it. We have impacted it to such a degree that it has not gone along its course. In 2020, I guess there were still some people that were saying, "Oh, it's a bunch of hokum," even though the fire is raining down on you. The locusts are swarming in Africa, and the storms this particular year, 30. You've got 30 so far, but as of this date, I'm looking at the note, more than you've ever had. You've never had that many in the Caribbean and the Atlantic basin. They're getting more frequent, more intense, and I guess what I'm trying to say is, break the bad news to you, is that it's not like, whew, can't wait till 2020 is over because that was such a crappy year. I'm sure it'll be much better in the years to come. So it's not going to get better. It's not going to get better. You've already reached a point of no return. Okay, I'm using the word better. It's different. We have changed. We are entering a new era. We've reached the tipping point where we can't do what we've been doing, and we'll continue to the bitter end after the economic forces make it start to crumble to the point where you're forced to do things differently. You're forced to, and I'll give you an example. When the remember the pandemic? They called it the pandemic, the COVID. I've seen from the notes, the COVID, and from 2020 that it was something all of a sudden. People in North America became aware of it, and but when I look back at some of the old TV broadcasts and so on, there's a lot of talk about, oh, look at this virus, gee, where'd that come from? And actually they don't even ask that much why is this so? When the unleashing of viruses from wild places is caused by humans, part of the Anthropocene, I would argue, because people, through greed, have gone into wild places and they have kidnapped animals there. And they brought them to a butcher shop. They call it a wet market, really gross sounding, in Wuhan province in China. And they start hacking away, blood splaying everywhere, along with it. Things that are in it, organisms that are not there. They would have stayed where they were and have been very happy living amongst the wild places untouched by humans. But the humans came in and they did what they did, and they unleashed upon ourselves. We unleashed upon ourselves through pure act of greed and nothing else. These viruses, and the one that came, technically it was COVID-19 because it started in the year 2019, right before my favorite decade. That was just one in a long series of things unleashed on the planet. So by humans, by human intervention, and so things can be done to stop that from happening, but they probably won't for a while until you finally figure it out. And when you do, then you can stop the damage. You can stop the damage, but it's too late to prevent the effects of the cumulative effects of what has happened to us from affecting your lives, and it affects our lives in the future. We have to live with the mistakes that you made. And so, anyway, cheery thought, eh? That's the significance, really, of this work of literature. So let's get on with the cheeriness of chapter 1. When the cock crows. All right, just sit back, get your coffee. Actually, you mind getting me some? I've had enough. It's where I am right now. It's Eastern Standard Time, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a little after. So where you are, maybe it's still morning, and you can go ahead and have your Joe. But for those of us on the East Coast, you've already been to church and gotten back, or you've already been to beach yoga, and so you're all ready to get a little bit of intellectual stimulation, and that is wrapped up in a enjoyable form of a book of literature. Okay, here's what I wrote in Captain's Log, Volume 20, number 0001 of Book 48. I don't know which number that is, but at 848. I wrote this at the dockside at the Hermitage. It was a Tuesday. And here's what I wrote. When a cock crowed this morning, I paused for a moment. Not that his throaty cry was any more earnest or in tune than usual, as far as I could tell. But I found myself feeling very content. All was right with the world. He was telling me he was full of life, and there was more than enough room for optimism for what the future would bring. I knew that, more likely, he was just baying away, prompted by some genetic sequence embedded in his soul, if he even has one of those. These were the thoughts that seeped into my head as I stood there, morning brew in hand, staring out at the dull glint of the morning sun making her way through the haze, reflecting softly off the water that stretched away from the dock and towards the bay, farther off in the distance, where Her Majesty was poised just above the horizon. I must be getting old. Yeah, that's for sure. Maybe I was just in a reflective mood. Maybe the two go together. Who knows? But my thoughts drifted back to the first time I heard a cock crow. That was many, many years ago, back in the year 2020. I remember the year. Who could forget that one? Other things I don't quite remember with such precision. Not that that matters too much, I guess. What type of adventure I was on with Larry and Art on our bikes, I don't recall. Not that that matters too much either. But I do remember negotiating through the urban landscape of Miami in what some people gamely called the Upper East Side. Let me just pause there for a moment to let you know that this first live episode of the readings of 2020 is coming to you the first day of the Miami Book Festival, or the Miami Book Fair, and which is has always been near and dear to my heart. Those of you who've read the book know that I was very bookish. I am very bookish because somewhere out there, I'm a little boy in Miami riding my bike with Larry and Art. Okay, and you might think, that seems odd. How could that be? Well, that could be through the magic of the your willing suspension of disbelief. It's one of those things that happens whenever you have a story that involves time travel. So it never actually does make sense, but it does if you want it to. So this is Sunday, the first day of the 2020 version of the Miami Book Festival, Book Fair, and I am manning the booth today for First Run Books. That's the publisher of the of this thing here. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, I was on the Upper East Side riding a bike with Larry and Art. I do remember negotiating through the urban landscape of Miami in what some people gamely called the Upper East Side. That probably sounds incredibly dangerous to you. 3 kids riding their bikes back in the roaring 20s on the streets of what was then an urban jungle called Miami, replete with busy roads, people with bad intent, and God only knows what else. Other images pop into my head. I see the top of my wheel spinning as I lean forward and up on my bike, looking down at the rush of rubber before me, carrying me onward. Here in the future, where I sit now at the dock, I trained my mind's eye to peer deeper into the distant past, seeing things as they once were, reliving things as they had once happened, feeling what I felt as a youngster so many years ago. I see myself looking down, studying the thin line of black grime in the crevices on the inside folds of my elbow. That never happened to you? Or you ever happens to me all the time. Not that I really remember specifically seeing grime in my elbow pits that particular day, but I do know I did at one point or another. I can see that image so clearly in my mind. It's funny how memories can work that way, seeing things in such vivid detail even so many years after the fact. Like I said, I must be getting old. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. The strange sound of a rooster crowing in the middle of an urban landscape, a landscape that doesn't exist anymore. Back then, I'm sure I had heard a cock crow on cartoons and animal shows on TV, but that was not the same thing as hearing that distinctive sound live while riding your bike on a city sidewalk. The sound could have just as well come from another planet or floating through the air as a byproduct of some weird science experiment in someone's garage. Somewhere in the midst of the concrete and cars and dingy motels was the sound of an actual barnyard animal. How eerie and out of place was that sound, or the sound of any living thing that wasn't human, beyond the occasional shrieks of the green Amazon parrots who had found their freedom, or the high-pitched call of the squirrels who had managed to find their niche in this world that we had created for them. Okay, there I go again, going off on a riff about the good old days. like I said, that was quite some time ago, and the days were not that great, to be honest with you. I was one of those weird kids back then that liked to read the newspaper and watch news shows on the television. There was a constant parade of bad things happening, which I relished for reasons that are not that clear to me. There were the wars in the Middle East, rising oil prices, the runaway budget deficit of the U.S. government, the retirement of what we called baby boomers that put a strain on the Social Security system, and pension plans that were either in bankruptcy or headed in that direction. My mom always said the bringers of the bad news were just selling misery. As if on cue, the news show would run an ad for aspirin, a stomach antacid, or the occasional antidepressant. "See, I told you," she would say with some amount of authority. Merchants of misery notwithstanding, we all knew that life was getting a little more difficult back in the 20s. Our prospects looked bleaker with each passing day. Everything cost more, and those who were lucky enough to have a good job were hard-pressed to make ends meet. Sound familiar? People who had a job or two discovered that an ever-increasing chunk of their pay went for taxes to pay for the constant wars we were fighting, trying to pay for the upkeep of those too old to work, and, of course, pay for the debts run up by politicians, long since dead, who borrowed money on the national credit card. People who thought they would retire in their 60s discovered that the new 60 was 40. And they had to try and compete with people in their 40s, now apparently in their 20s, for a place in an ever-shrinking workforce. Those who worked hard all their lives so they could retire in their 60s discovered they couldn't afford to do that. They had to keep working until they dropped dead of exhaustion. Sound familiar? Not very many people back in the 20s were old enough to remember what life was like during the Great Depression of the 1930s, much less the carefree 1920s that preceded it, but many people had an inkling that something was seriously wrong. Even while we reprised our own version of the Roaring Twenties a century after the first one. In hindsight, we know now we were in the middle of a slow-motion economic catastrophe. But at the time, we just kept cruising along as if nothing really was wrong with the way things were. I know that is what I did. Of course I did. That is what I was supposed to do. I was just a kid, trying to be a kid, cruising on my bike like every kid does. That is when I first heard the cry of a rooster beckoning to me. Let me tell you what happened. Except not right now. You're going to have to tune in for the rest of Chapter 1, this entry, in the Captain's Log. Sorry to do that to you, but I don't want to... I'm told that I prattle on a little too long, longer than I really should, and people get bored. Besides, it gives you something to look forward to. Okay, so what's going to happen is that as we go along, or as I go along, I will be reading portions of the book that fall under Chapter 1, and you'll be able to look it up, and I will read them and give you some more commentary about it. Those won't be in live broadcasts. Those will just be in smaller segments or bite-sized pieces. You'll be able to access everything on the YouTube channel and also the website for the book. It's called, let me see, here it is, 2020 thebook.com. So if you go to the website, you'll be able to browse around in there. If you look at the crib notes, it breaks down each section of the book by the part 1, 2, 3, and so on, and each part has 5 broken down into 5 entries into the log, into the captain's log books, and also known as chapters. Okay, and you can also go to the website for the author. The YouTube channel is B. Sean Clark, where you are now, and there you have, right, there's the website for the author. This guy who is the author of the aforementioned book. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this first installment. Maybe it was a little rough, but we have very little experience, we being the editors and myself. But if you're interested in more, please click around there where it says subscribe and click on the bell thing, and then that will notify you when we go live again. And I think it also will notify you when a new video is posted. So anyway, that's all I have for today. Enjoy the book fair.